welcome to Select Arcane, and welcome to the Model Horse Judging Seminar for the Beginner Judge. I am Select Arcane, your host for today. Back in November, I posted the Model Horse Judging 101 video, which was a big hit. There I gave a 10,000 foot overview of what it is to be a model horse judge. I talked about what makes up breed, what is performance, what should judges be really looking for, and what roles should they uphold at the show. But I never got to go into how exactly do you choose a horse on the table. Well, I kinda did, but not enough for you to quantify how and why a horse should be a winner. And that's what the seminar is for today. If you haven't already, go check out the Judging Model Horse Shows 101 video, otherwise you won't really know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't seen my previous seminar video, Model Horse Shows for the Beginner Shower, then you should probably check that out as well. Otherwise, again, you won't know what I'm talking about. Alright, let's get started. I started judging model horse shows in 2017, and I started hosting my own in 2018. It was really tough when I first started because I felt like I didn't have any guidance other than being thrown into the deep end. I would do what was called scribing, following around an experienced judge and writing down the selections of the judge's picks on the table. Those judges would give me a lot of feedback as to why they were choosing a model, and what exactly they were looking for. It's wild that it's only 7 years ago, but things are so much different now. If you weren't volunteering to scribe, you were pretty much out of luck. In our local Region 11, it was actually quite common to hold seminars and bring people in to speak about their talents, like judging. But from what I heard from other communities and other show regions, that was absolutely not the case at the time. And this is back when people were still gatekeeping information and holding on to their resources. Things are so much different now and so much more open, and it's one of the reasons why I started this channel. So, assuming that you've seen my last two videos, which I hope you have, let's do a very quick recap about the ABCs and the types of classes that you can expect at a model horse show. The ABCs represent anatomy, biomechanics, and conformation, the building blocks of what make up a model horse. You need to establish, is this a horse at all, or is it a donkey, a mule, zebra? Could this move like a horse or equid of any capacity? And for conformation, what breed is this? Is it representative of the breed that the shower is representing? The ABCs are prevalent for any class that you're showing a horse in, or judging for that matter. For the most part, if a model fails one part of the ABCs, it should not be winning on the table. There are exceptions to this rule, which we'll discuss. There are 4 divisions in model horse showing in general: breed, workmanship, collectibility, and performance. The other videos go into this in great detail of what these actually mean. Let's start with breed. It's one of my favorite classes to judge, and I really enjoy showing in it. We're looking for the model that best represents the breed on the table. Each class is divided by different breeds or different types. So you'll have your pony class, your draft class, warmbloods, sport horses, etc. Keep in mind that when we're talking about breed, we are talking about different types of the same breed as well. The foal class is usually first in the breed division, so let's start there. Foals are weird. They are not a miniature version of their parents, they're their own thing. Their eyes are the same as if they were an adult, their ears are usually huge, their legs are super long, and don't get me started about their colors. It's important to know that each foal is going to look like a very different version than what their parents are going to be. Some foals are going to look very typey, like Arabians, and some are going to look very generic until they start growing up a little bit. Foals start off with their baby coat, so they don't look like their usual adult color. For example, this bay foal has brownish gray legs. They aren't going to have their black points until they're about 4 to 6 months old. And after their second shed, you're only then going to see their true adult color. That's an important factor to consider in with foals. Knowing this, the younger your foal is, the more generic you can make the breed, unless they're extremely typey. So let's turn our attention to horses on a real table. So, as I said, foals are a bit weird. Here we have 3 foals all lined up, 2 with cards, 1 without. So let's just say we're at a show, these are on the table, and I'm judging, obviously. So I walk up and you see that we have what we're gonna call an Appaloosa because we'll pretend we have tags. We have an Irish Sport Horse and we have an Arabian. That's what has been presented to us. So as we go through it, look at each horse individually. Start with the Arabian. Does this foal look like an Arabian? Does it have the conformation of a baby Arabian? And remember that it's not a miniaturized version of its parents, like a miniature horse would be. They have really, really long legs, they have really big ears, and they look a lot different. When you move over to the Irish Sport Horse, it's clear that this foal is a lot older, has slightly different proportions to this newborn foal. Ears are still really big, legs are still really long, and then you have the exact same mold with a different coloring on this foal right here. So who would be the winner in this case? Well, we would then look at the differences between them. One, this foal is a lot younger. These two are probably the same age, so we take those into consideration. Remember, we're not looking at finish work at all. We're only looking at the best representation of the breed. So does this look like an Arabian? Does it follow the ABCs? Well, the ABCs are a little bit weird because this foal is learning how to stand. The angles are a little bit odd. It's kind of sloping downwards, but these are things that can be forgiven because of the age and what this horse is representing. What's a really good indicator is the fact that this foal does not have really chestnut legs. It has 4 stockings on its legs. However, the fading goes up the leg, which is a really nice touch by Breyer. This is a much older model compared to these two. So you're seeing the age of the foal. The finish work on the foal is a lot nicer, a lot cleaner, but that's important because we're talking about breed. Here, we're looking at this Irish Sport Horse. You see it's a little bit typey, nice chunky body of a sport horse. You see that the masking is really nice, and according to the card on this foal does come in pinto. Irish Sport Horse typically does not come in pinto. However, if you know the breeds, you know that an Irish sport horse in general can be a cross. So this foal is representing the cross of the Irish Sport Horse as designated on the card. That's why a card is so important if you're not sure as a judge. Now, this Appaloosa here is the exact same mold as this Irish Sport Horse. So does this go from stock horse to Warmblood? Because an Irish Sport Horse is a Warmblood in this case. So stock horses typically have a much heavier build, much stockier frame, thick legs, nice bone, and they typically have a very triangular head, big cheeks, small muzzle. Even the foals typically have small ears, so when you look at these models together, which one represents Warmblood and which one represents a stock horse better? So in my personal opinion, this foal right here does not represent a stock horse as much as this represents a Warmblood. Secondly, when you look at the fade on the legs of this Arabian foal, and you go over here, a baby black foal is not born black. So I know that this representing a black foal, so you pretty much guarantee that this foal is going to go gray. It doesn't have any gray goggles, it doesn't have any gray nose. However, you pretty much guarantee this is going to be a gray foal. So does it represent a gray foal Appaloosa in the best of its abilities? Well, it could if there was a card on this table that would show you that. So this one kind of leaves you in limbo a little bit. This one's a lot clearer as to what it's trying to represent. And this foal definitely represents what's on the card. So in my personal opinion, it would be between these foals on the table of who would be better. Remember, we're only going up to 3rd place in this case. So I would give this foal a 3rd place. Between these foals, this one has a nice typey nose. You can clearly see it's an Arabian. You do know it's a newborn foal based on the ABCs. However, it is a very good example of an Arabian. Irish Sport Horse in this case, this foal has done very well as an Irish Sport Horse for me. So I can confidently say that this foal would make a very good Irish Sport Horse because they do come in a variety of shapes. A lot of them have Irish cob in them or Connemara, so they do come in a variety of shapes. So if you're stuck between the two, then you can kind of start looking at the finish work. You can see here that this foal has a little bit of overspray in its mane, and even though you're not judging workmanship, it's a really nice differentiator if you're really stuck on which you prefer. So going by the overspray, going by maybe the masking is a little bit soft over here and not as crisp because maybe the factory didn't do such a great job. This foal is a little bit dusty because I haven't washed it, but weigh the pros and cons between the foals. In my personal opinion, I would give this Arabian foal first, Irish Sport Horse a very close second, and this Appaloosa foal a third. If this Appaloosa foal had had a card on the table, the difference might have been tipped a little bit, but the shower in this case put a little bit more effort into putting the card on the table. So I have the three same foals here as before, but I've done something different. I've changed this Irish Sport Horse foal out to an Australian stock horse. Now, they are completely different breeds. They are still in the Warmblood category, but they are vastly different. So how does that stack up to the exact same three horses? So looking again at the Arabian as we talked about, we can talk about how typey it is, we can talk about the ABCs, the age of the foal really representing an Arabian foal. We can talk about how it would have been nice to have a card pointing out if this is a black foal, if this is a gray foal, because that would have helped the case on this foal a lot better. But then we look at the Australian stock horse. So what is an Australian stock horse? It's not a stock horse at all. It is a Warmblood, but they typically are a lot heavier. They have a lot of Brumby influence, which kind of looks a little bit Mustangy, but it's completely its own thing. They have a different body shape. So can this represent an Australian stock horse? Well, it could. You have a very heavy set foal in here, very Warmblood type, like the Irish Sport Horse, which can pull a little bit light, a little bit heavy. It gives a lot of variance to what the foal can look like if you choose a breed like that. So Australian stock horse is another one, but they are typically a little bit heavier. This foal has a lot of bone, good ABCs, showing off the Warmblood, and it really does look like the photo in the reference. So I would say that this foal can pull either way, Australian stock horse, Irish Sport Horse, and some judges like giving a lot of extra points to more unique breeds that you may find a little bit uncommon. Not all judges, but some do. So if you see 10 Arabian foals on the table, yeah, okay, it looks like an Arabian, but sometimes that uniqueness that a shower puts on the table might pull a little bit of sway. So in this case, I would say that as an Australian stock horse, because it's a little bit more unique, a little bit more different, it really does fit within the ABCs, it really does fit within the type. It really looks like the reference. In fact, it looks more like the reference described on the card than this Arabian foal does on this card. There is a liver chestnut on this card here. However, this one just pulls a lot closer. Even with a bit of overspray, we're not supposed to really judge that in this case. So I would say that as an Australian stock horse, this foal would take a first, this Arabian would take a second, and the same issues came up for the Appaloosa foal, so I would put that back into third. Look at this Shetland pony example. These two are both purebred Shetland ponies. The pony on the left is an American Shetland pony. They're bred to be taller, leaner, and a small version of an Arabian, if you will. And the pony on the right is a British Shetland, the original, made for feed, not speed. Again, both could equally win a pony class if it represented as a Shetland. Look at this Arabian example. These three horses are all purebred Arabians, but they are all built for a very different purpose. The horse on the far left is doing saddle seat. The horse in the middle is doing halter, and the horse on the right is an endurance champion. The horse in the middle, the halter Arabian, looks like the most Arabian of all of these. I'm sure you would agree with that. When you look at this horse, it's what you think an Arabian should look like. But not all model horses are made equally, and Breyer does a really good job of showing different types of the same breed equally. Here's a really good example of what the saddle seat Arabian versus the endurance Arabian would look like in model form. It just so happens that the left horse, the Mini Kimosabi, is a mini, and the right horse, Bangles, is a micro. but in some shows, these two would compete together. At first glance, you'd be inclined to choose the Mini Kimosabi on the left because obviously this is a more typey Arabian. Bangles looks a little lumpy, to be honest. But what happens if this reference was presented by the shower? This is clearly an endurance Arabian picture, and does it look anything like Mini Kimosabi? No, it actually kind of looks more like Bangles. In this case, the shower will be indicating the type of Arabian that this Bangles is showing as. Now let's try the opposite. Here we have a saddle seat Arabian in a very similar pose to Mini Kimosabi. I tried to find something in the same pose and looked exactly the same, and that completely flips the script on Bangles. If both of these images were presented as references for each horse, it would be up to the judge to determine which one fits the breed best. Remember, in breed, it is not up for the judge to determine who has the most beautiful paint job and the most talent. That is for workmanship. So here we have a Warmblood sport horse class. In this case, this class is all of those types of horses together. Thoroughbreds and standardbreds are excluded out of that class. So here we have a Trakehner, a Dutch Warmblood, and an Australian stock horse. Remember, with the foals that we were just talking about, Australian stock horse does pull more Warmblood, and it's classified as a Warmblood, not a stock horse, so it is completely legitimate for this class. You can also put the Australian stock horse in the other category because it is very unique, and some judges aren't really sure where to put it, but it is on the NAMSA page classified as a Warmblood. So looking at these two horses right here, they're both very similar. It's Snowman and Totulus if you're not familiar, but as a Trakehner, you would look at the ABCs again. So Snowman is a very correct model. He has a really nice hip, really nice leg, everything nicely matches up. Everything's very even. It's a really nice sculpt by Breyer, and they typically do very well in the Warmblood class in general. He doesn't have any molding flaws. This particular Snowman is very clean with no markings, so he's a really nice model in general. This Totulus is also a very nice model. Again, fits the ABCs really well. He's doing an action movement. Specifically, he's doing an extended trot, I think. Honestly, not sure. And everything lines up well with the measurements. They have both really have a nice profile. They both have really nice proportions, and it can be really tough to choose between them, especially since the Warmblood class, in my eyes, has a lot of horses that look honestly very similar to each other. A lot of Warmbloods pull the same breeds into different sport horse categories. So for example, Hanoverian Dutch Warmblood is very prevalent in sport horses. Irish sport horse, Canadian sport horse, American sport horse. They have a lot of influence. So you'll see a lot of similar structures in each of those breeds. When you look at the Australian stock horse in comparison though, you have to kind of weigh the pros and cons. One, do I really want the Australian stock horse in the Warmblood class, or would I really prefer it in the other category? I'm using Mirabella because even though she really does not fit the Australian stock horse, she is super typey in the Morgan category. It's a really classic example of what a new shower may do on the table. So when you look at Mirabella here, she's so classically Morgan. Has a nice scooping face, heavy body. She's specifically sculpted as a Morgan and fits that really well. As an older model, she also fits the ABCs quite nicely. She does have some molding flaws that you do need to completely accept. This is plastic, not resin, so you do have to forgive a lot of flaws. Some judges do pull more towards the modern models, because like Snowman and Totulus, and will kind of push back on the vintage models, and some show hosts will set up a vintage class to accommodate for that. But not all the time. Sometimes the vintage models can compete against the newer models if the ABCs are there. So in my personal opinion, because this really looks more Morgan, even though the Australian stock horse is there, even though the colors are correct, an Australian stock horse can be Palomino, this body type is so heavy The legs are not quite there. The face is very far off a traditional Australian stock horse. I would kind of discount this as maybe the shower should have put this in the other category. I don't think Mirabella really fits Australian stock horse. I think she should probably show as a Morgan. So I would kind of discount this and put her in third place in this case. Or if I'm feeling generous, I might tell the shower, hey, maybe put this in the other category. So going back to the Trakehner versus the Dutch Warmblood, it can be really, really tough because they are very similar. But Dutch Warmbloods, I find, tend to be a lot heavier. I find Trakehners a little bit smaller and a little bit lighter in my local area. I know that's not always the case. Some breeding farms do breed them a little bit heavier. And depending on the stud books of these, sometimes you can cross breed and cross-register, especially in thoroughbreds. Sometimes there's a lot of thoroughbred influence. So not specifically for these two registries, but it's just something to take into account. So when you look at Dutch Warmblood, which Totilas actually is in real life, there's actually a picture of Totilas on this card, so it matches him really, really well. You have two examples on this card, one of Totilas, one of a Dutch Warmblood just standing still, and you can see the heaviness in his frame, you see the exaggerated movements, and that's captured on this card. When you look at Snowman as a Trakehner, yes, he does fit. He's a little bit leaner than Totilas. He does fit the molding really well. There's no gray horse on this card specifically, though it does say on the card that they do come in gray. So you kind of weigh the pros and cons. Well, on one hand, he fits really well. On the other hand, Totilas has represented himself on the card. It's a portrait model, and that will be up to the judge's discretion. Again, like the foals, you can talk about a little bit of workmanship. Is there a little bit of overspray, or maybe the owner didn't dust the model or clean the model that well? You can take that to help you push your decision over. You can grab a judge that maybe has more experience to help you walk you through your thought concepts and your processes. But personally, I think I would move towards Totilas himself because it's really represented more on the card. Both of these models fit really, really well with the breeds associated with them, but I would put Totilas, the Dutch Warmblood, as number 1, Snowman, the Trakehner, is number 2, and poor Mirabella should not even be in this class.
Let's talk workmanship. Remember, Briars don't fit into workmanship unless they're a custom. This is for non-factory models, which includes customs, resins, and some factory horses that were done hand-painted one of a kind, like some Peter Stones. Here, we're following the ABCs to a T, especially true for customs, and we're solely looking at the artistry and expertise of the paint job and how the horse is made. This will include how well seams are sanded, how well the horse is prepped, the shading, the color variation, the resculpting, the fine details, etc., etc. One can argue a better artist makes a better workmanship champion, but this is not always the case. I've had models that I've bought for thousands of US dollars lose to horses that I have painted myself. And we all know I am no Nicky Button or Mel Miller. So workmanship is not just for professionals. For comparison's sake, let's look at two medallions that I painted a couple years ago. The flea-bitten guy on the left is one of the first gray horses I ever painted. The dapple gray on the right came maybe 2 years later. Big difference between the two, neither of them fabulous. Here, let's zoom into both of them so you can see them better. And now both of them back together. Let's look at the left horse first. This is one of the first ever 3D printed medallions produced by Maggie Bennett. He was cast in resin later on, but I'm saying it because he's very clean. He wasn't sculpted by hand. I used mixed media for this guy, mostly pigments, and some pencil for the flea bites. There's very little shading on him and very little variation. The flea bites are a little wonky. Let's turn our attention back to the dapple gray. A bit better, Dapples are a little bit irregular, not quite star-shaped and how they should be, but there's some clear definition and some clear shading. I obviously improved my skills since my Dapple Gray. It's pretty clear here that between the two, I would personally peg the Dapple Gray a much superior horse. Between these two, but depending on whatever else is on the table, the Flea Bite could potentially come out on top if the Dapple Gray wasn't there. One thing I've never heard about in any seminar for judging is the scalability of workmanship. I've already mentioned it, but micros typically do not compete against the bigger horses unless it's a really small show. In my personal opinion, I think they should be judged separately. Because when you start walking up to a ring, the first thing you see are the big traditionals, and they look gorgeous and impressive. And the little guys are kind of an afterthought. So if you are judging both at the same time, consider these few things. A larger model may look impressive as soon as you walk up to it, but pay very close attention to how many details are packed in. An artist has a lot more room to fit in those details, so check and make sure that they did. Spend a lot more time on the little ones. Bring your reading glasses or bring a magnifying glass if you have to. Those little micros can pack a lot of detail in too. Have you seen how tiny micro eyes are? Unfortunately, I've been around a lot of judges who have completely ignored micros and have refused to judge them because they can't see them. But as a judge, you should take them into consideration and spend the time. Customs worm their way into the workmanship category very well. Here you're looking at an altered original finish model to be unique, whether that's resculpting or repainting. Heavily lean into the ABCs and really look at the prep work. Are the alterations seamless? Is the paint job really smooth? And does it fit the ABCs? Fantasy horses are a little bit different because they may not fit the traditional ABCs, but really look at the prep work, finish work, and alterations. Alright, so collectibility is not my strong suit. I established what it is in my last two videos, but essentially it's the current collectible value of a model horse today. It doesn't need to be the rarest, it doesn't need to be one of a kind, but what is the most valuable to people, not necessarily money-wise either. A really good example of collectibility is the Caves of Lascaux Briar Zebra, made in 2015 for Briarfest as a tent model. This guy sold for a whopping $25 US. I know, I was there. People loved him so much, I swear people were clamoring over each other and nearly throwing each other to the ground. Maybe not that dramatic, but you get the point. As soon as people got their mitts on him, he was on the aftermarket for $500 US. And even still, you can find them on eBay for $800. This is an example of a very collectible model and a very desired model. There were only 650 made of Caves of Lascaux, making him a special run. He would fit in the special run class and therefore not directly compete against one-of-a-kind models or regular runs. So talking about collectability, we're going back to the same three foals as before. We're talking about the Succession lofi foal, we're talking about Dakota, and we're going to talk about the Black Tie Affair JC Penney special run. Now, ordinarily, these two foals right here would compete against each other. They're both regular runs from different time periods, and this one is actually a special run. So this special run foal should not be in the same class as the regular runs. However, due to the fact that I just don't have that many Briars, and I don't have access to all my old collection anymore because I sold them all, I had to put them together just to keep things simple. So let's just pretend that this JC Penney foal is actually a regular run. So we're going to completely ignore that. Let's say it's belongs in the same class. So we have three foals all lined up for the same class. You can automatically discount the Succession lofi foal because there's no collectibility card on the table. You cannot judge collectibility if there's no card on the table, and you're not eligible to anything. So automatically this foal is disqualified. It comes in last place. When you look at the Dakota versus the Black Tie Affair, remember, I'm not the best with collectibility, but I do know some things regarding it. Both of these cards both state the exact same amount of information: the original retail value, who sculpted the foal, how many were made,
In this specific case, the foals don't have how many were made because they're open-ended regular runs for both of them. So you have to just kind of consider that. So who currently is more valuable right now? The Dakota versus the Black Tie Affair. Well, this Dakota is not particularly valuable to the collectible community. At the moment, they still value about the same as they did originally, which was $15 US. They're relatively easy to find in the marketplace. You can find them on Facebook a lot, but nobody really collects them. Actually, the Black Tie Affair, which didn't really have a retail value price because it came as a set with the strapless and the Zippo Pine Bar, which had the matching markings. There was no real set amount of them described on Identify Your Briar, so it's kind of up in the air how many were actually made, but they were a special run. In this case, a regular run. So, how much is this foal worth today? Well, they're relatively collectible, probably more collectible than the Dakota. They can be separated out from their family, the strapless and the Zippo Pine Bar, but more often than not, you see them by themselves. So, all in all, this Black Tie Affair foal is more collectible than the Dakota, and the Succession Lafire foal doesn't even have a card on the table and therefore is disqualified. If the Succession Lafire did have a card on the table and it was eligible for collectibility, then the Succession Lafire was originally valued at approximately $100 with his dam Succession, and today they are very collectible. It's really hard to find the originals in really good condition, and this guy is the original version, the chestnut and the gray mare. So therefore, this Succession Lafire foal is more collectible than the Dakota. So if all three of them had cards, then I would say that more than likely this foal, the Arabian, would be number 1, the Black Tie Affair would be number 2, and the Dakota would be number 3.
Performance can be exceptionally fun or especially nitpicky, maybe even both. Understanding a multitude of equine disciplines as well as the horses themselves is key for performance judging. Here I have the same horse in the same tack. 2 different shows, different days. I made a critical error in one of these entries that landed this model a last place in her performance class. The other, she took home a grand champion in performance. What is it that I missed? I'll give you a second to think about it. If you saw her stirrups rolled up in this image, then you would be right. I always keep this saddle stored with the stirrups up so that they don't become floppy and bang around, but I completely forgot to unfurl them for the show. A huge mistake on my part that landed her last place. It's this attention to detail that makes you an ideal performance judge. It might seem obvious, but it's a very small detail on a very small horse. If an entry has a doll, it's not the be-all and end-all. In fact, a doll can make or break your performance setup. So as a judge, take that doll into consideration. Whether it's the scale, the right attire, the position, it doesn't matter. That doll is part of the entry. Actually knowing equine disciplines is kind of the key to performance judging. It's one thing to have a keen eye and know how everything should fit, but you also need to know the exact rules and regulations of each class. I know it's a lot, but it's very important. Knowing what you're looking at will really help you understand what the horse is doing and if it's correct. Even weird classes like the other scene has a lot of interesting entries. For example, a thoroughbred auction, you would always have a stud chain on the horse, either over the nose or under the lip. Having a rope halter or a regular lead rope, or having the handler in a t-shirt is an absolute no-no. At my first ever show where I was showing an equicizer with horses on it, I got a last place because the judge actually thought it was a hot walker. And those 2 machines are completely different even though I had a card on the table. The judge said to me that if she knew that it was an equicizer and not a hot walker, I would have won first place. when it clearly said that it was an equicizer. Yikes. If you're not sure about the horses in a class, or if you have questions or know somebody in the show, like another judge, who knows more than you do in a certain discipline, feel free to bring them over and ask. There's no harm in it, and there's no rules against it. I always bring over somebody who knows more about driving than I do. Novice Performance is the gateway into the Open Performance division. Everyone starts somewhere, and not everyone can afford Russian-made tack, customs or artist resins in the perfect pose, or dolls covered in rhinestones. Here you're going to find a lot of molded-on tack factory-made, ill-fitting briar tack straight out of the package, and jumps that are way too high for a model coming in at a trot. Some shows, but not all, take Novice Performance as a tutorial. Sometimes this class is judged openly by the judge, explaining exactly what went wrong and what is doing really well. Helpful tips such as striding before a fence, dolls being put in the correct position with sticky wax, or the introduction of sticky wax in general. Some judges approach Novice Performance as the ultimate learning opportunity, with the show host's permission, of course. Depending on your own personal style of judging, whether you prefer to do it in the open tutorial sense, or base it like a regular class, remember never to critique a model to a shower unless that shower asks. Show hosts take note of this part. When somebody graduates out of Novice Performance, they usually enter Open Performance automatically, without being able to go back. Some showers are not ready for this leap and prefer an intermediate performance class, non-NAN. If you have room in your show, consider an intermediate performance division that allows those novices not ready for Open Performance to enter a class. I found it really useful in my own shows. If you're a photo showing judge, take everything I've said into consideration. The only difference between photo showing and live showing is the fact that you can't look around the model because it's not a 3D space. But no big deal, just judge on what you can see. Take into account the ABCs or if the doll is sitting too far forward. Photo showing is so much easier than live showing just because you don't have to be on your feet all day. And it's a really nice place to start for judging. Nice and easy. No pressure. That was a lot, right? Nearly 40 minutes of content? Geez, there was a lot to cover, and I really hope that I covered everything that everyone wanted to. There's a lot to judging, and it's really fun once you actually get going, and it's even better when you find a mentor who can actually help you and walk you through it in person. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram @SelectArcane or on Facebook by the same name. Thanks for watching. Bye!